Hello, everyone. Welcome to this workshop that we are going to just start in a couple of seconds. Invite all of you to ask questions along the way. I have a spatial chat that's open as well. So if you have any questions that you may have for me, I'd love to make this as interactive as possible. And the more questions we ask, the more we learn together. Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you once again for spending this time with me. And I look forward to being able to provide some insights on how you can turn your ideas into a startup. A big part of what I would like to cover today is perhaps more on the why than on the how. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I think there are enough information out there, there are enough different programs out there that can help you to figure out the how. But essentially, the why is important. It's crucial to really try to capture what is it that makes a huge difference to creating a winning startup. I'm just going to check on my video to make sure that you're able to see me as well. Oh, let's go ahead with this. I'd like to start with three different words. Sorry, let me just check that out one more time to see why I'm not getting the video on. Give me a second. Oh, there we go. Okay, just want to make sure that this is working for everyone. Right, I would like to just start by maybe challenging each one of us to really think about the three words that's in front of us. The first is to dream, and then to test, and then to figure out how to raise the money, right? And the first question is, how crazy are you about your idea? Is this something that you wake up every morning thinking about it? Is it something that you sleep at night and you dream about it? And is this something that you talk to with everybody you meet about it? Right. And I think this is important because it lays the framework to how serious you're going to take this concept or this idea that you have to the next level. Right. And once you have figured out how crazy you are about it, how much you talk about it, then the real question, and why you're turning your idea into a startup is, well, who's funding it? Right? Are you going to be supporting it yourself? Are you going to be inviting external investors to come in? Or are you going to make sure that the business itself is profitable from an early time of the company so that it can fund itself? Well, by way of introduction, my name is Daniel Lin, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Funded Here. I made my biggest investment 11 years ago when I married my childhood sweetheart. And since then, had 5 different spin-offs. I'm a father to 5 young boys. My eldest is 10. And since then, every 2 years, I had a kid. So I have a 10-year-old, 8-year-old, 6-year-old, 4-year-old. And to top it off, I decided to start my startup 4 years ago, 4 kids later, to really see how I can help connect investors to very promising startups. So this is my introduction to give you just some context of the different challenges that we all face as founders together. We are in the same boat. I hope that while we are talking and sharing ideas together, we can really use this opportunity to learn from each other. I'm not sure if you can respond, but if you can, maybe in your own in your own room, just think about some of the questions I would like to put forward here. Now, I think firstly, how many of you know that an idea isn't good enough to be a startup? Let's take some time to sort of just think about it. Have you heard many people say, I've got this great idea, is this something that everybody would like? And then figure out, is this really worth a business? So I think most of us would agree that, just having an idea isn't good enough. There are other different ingredients that are necessary. And today I would just like to run through these 4 different things very, very quickly. Right. The first is you need to know your ABCs. I will go into more details as to what this really means. And then we can talk a bit about the mission and the vision. Right. And I think that is an exercise that I would invite all of you to take part in, because it gives you a good sense of exactly what you're trying to achieve with this. Thirdly, take a very, very honest view on how strategic and how awesome your idea is. Is this something that only you can do? Is this something that the world needs? Is this something that you're able to pull through with the resources that you have? And last but not least, this whole idea that funding or raising capital is like oxygen to a human being. The moment you're out of funding, you're done. So I just like to start by sharing a bit of a quick story on one of the early startups that early ideas that I had. And one of it was, in our younger days, we used to have supper very late at night, and it was really very difficult to get supper at home at 3 a.m. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be great, if we were able to have people deliver food to us at 3 a.m. So I spoke to my friends, and all my friends were like, yeah, that's a great idea. After you go for drinks, after you have a late night out, you just want to be able to have some of your local delicacies at 3 a.m. and not have to figure out how to get it. Right? I asked all my friends, it was great. And then I realized that when I spoke to my parents about it, they were saying, that's a horrible idea, right? Why would anybody in their right mind want to have food at 3 a.m? Right? And I said, well, all my friends said it's great, they will support this idea. And they said, well, I mean, honestly, how many of your friends would really make up this new concept or this new business that you're doing? Right. And then that sort of really just set things in motion on really, do we really understand the market fit? Do we understand the people that would be using our product? Who are our customers? How big is this group of people? So let's start with the basics. Let's go down to, I call this the ABCs because there's just so many things that we can learn here. And I'd like to invite you to really just maybe take down some of these letters of the alphabet. If you don't know them, then do spend some time getting to know them. I think that, on Google today, you're able to get all this out there, understand the differences, so I'll just focus on a couple of few. So GMV, we should be familiar, gross merchandise value. But I would like to focus on the next two, TAM and SEM. So this is your total addressable market and your serviceable addressable market. And this really takes a very hard look at who will be your potential customers, how big it is. And I think if you are looking at the idea and what you're trying to achieve, then take a very, very hard look at your total addressable market. And out of this big group, how many of them would really be your clients, right? So in my earlier example, you would find that it is not just enough, that to say that the total addressable market for my idea is 6 million people in Singapore, even though they're all human beings and they all need to eat. The serviceable addressable market could be significantly smaller because it would usually be in the demographic of people who are, say, between 20 and 35 and are awake at 3 a.m. and are willing to pay a premium for food to be delivered, right? So once you look at the subsections and you go smaller and smaller, you realize that your SAM is actually significantly smaller. Right, you have GP, your gross profits, you have your SWOT analysis to sort of assess your strengths or weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats. And the next two, your proof of concept and your proof of value is absolutely crucial. I think this is one real piece that you need to look at. So when you have an idea and now you're looking and seeing, will this work in the market, right? You take your product to market and you put it out there and you see if people buy it. And I like to just use this as an example. Would people use your product for free? Right? At least they can say, yes, it works, and I don't mind using it. Right? Once you have got enough people saying, yes, I'll use it for free, then at the proof of value, you can really sort of test out how much are they willing to pay for it. Right? So back to my example, if everybody says, yes, I would love to pay for someone to deliver the food to me, then the question is how much. Now, if the food is $10 and if the delivery is $100, because nobody in their right mind would want to deliver food at 3 in the morning, then you kind of get a sense that the POV is not working out. Now, if it's $5 because everybody thinks that this is even the delivery people think this is great and they can make lots of money doing the graveyard shift, right? Then you have a better chance of making this a real business, right? The others, like your EBITDA and all that, is your financial terms. I think Google is more than sufficient to give you a crash course on your financial terms. So I'm not going to really touch on that. Now let's go to the basics. Let's go back to when I talk about dream and how do you crystallize this dream of yours? And I would like to start with the fundamentals of looking and asking ourselves, what is your vision and what is the mission, right? And there's a simple exercise I would like to take you all through. And this is called the why and the how, right? And I'll just give you 30 seconds, to think about the business that you're trying to achieve or the idea that you're trying to develop, right? And I'll put it this way: the vision statement gives you that why, right? It's an aspiration that you want to get to in, say, the next 3, 5, or for eternity, right? It's not where you are now, it's what you'll be doing on a daily basis to get there, right? And I would say if we can express it in the form, we exist to fill in the blank, right? So in my example, I can say we exist to ensure that nobody goes hungry at 3 a.m., right? It's an aspirational goal, right? And then the mission is the how. So we exist to ensure that nobody goes hungry at 3 a.m. in the morning by providing hot food or hot local food to individuals, for example. So that's the how. So that's the mission. That's what you would express to your investors, your stakeholders, on why and how you're doing what you believe to be the next biggest thing. So in your own space now, why don't you just open up a separate screen, go online, go to Google and search what are some good vision and mission statements you've seen. Why don't you do that right now and take a look at the likes of Nike, take a look at the likes of sports brands that you love. What is the vision and mission statement of McDonald's, for example? Right? What's the mission and vision statement of Tesla, for example? It's good to have a few copies in mind so that you kind of understand how some of these big organizations really think through about what really matters. And why I want to really emphasize on this as being absolutely crucial is because when investors come in, when your employees come in, when all the different stakeholders come in, they're going to say, hey, you should be doing this. Hey, you need to do that. This is the way to do this. You're going to get a lot of free, friendly, unwanted advice, right? And your vision and mission statement is going to help you really stay on track to be razor sharp focused. And I have to emphasize razor sharp because it's very easy to get distracted. So come back to this. This is going to be your sort of your go-to as you move in this journey. Now, once you have looked up a couple of different statements, the next question is, what is then your startup vision and mission statement? Right. Spend another 30 seconds to a minute as I'm just sort of talking this out. For yourself, you have this wonderful idea now. You're just wondering, is this something that the industry needs? Is this something that my friends need? Is this something that everyone needs? And how am I creating value for them? Right. So if you have a piece of paper in front, you can use your phone, just sort of type it in. I exist, or my startup exists to fill in the blank by fill in the blank, right? And put that on your drawing board stare at this before you sleep at night, dream about it when you sleep, wake up, keep making alterations until you're fully satisfied. Now, I would also say that the fewer the words, the more razor sharp focus you become, right? So invite your friends to really go into your vision and mission statement and say, hey, why are you using this specific word? Why is 3 a.m. important? Or why is going hungry important, right? And find the right words, find the right language to express exactly what you're trying to do. Let's go on to the next part, which is after we have dreamt about this idea, now let's go and test it into the market. And I would say that there are two main categories of individuals that you really want to look at, right? The first are your customers, right? And the second, who is your competition, right? So this is important because, again, the people who are going to pay for your product and service are your customers. So now let's be very, very clear. Who is your customer? How big is it? In my earlier slide, we talked about the total addressable market, talk about the serviceable addressable market. So ask yourself now, who is your customer? Who is going to be the one who's going to pay you money or pay you good money because they truly, truly believe in your product? How many of them can you get? How many of your customers can afford your product? And how many people are willing to test it out for you? Right? So this is where we try to kind of merge who your customer base is and your proof of concept to your proof of value. Right? So this is a step that is absolutely crucial, necessary. You really need to, if I may say, find people who are the most unlike you, right? Because that's important. You want to make sure that you're not sort of blindsided by your own bias, right? I mean, clearly we hang out with friends that we like who are very similar to us. So there's going to be a bias towards getting the right answers from people closest to you. I would say go and find people that you don't talk to, find colleagues that you may not be so familiar with, and really stress test this to understand how big is truly your customer base. There are a lot of resources out there to also kind of get a sense of what kind of numbers you're looking at the industry level, right? So there are many reports from big organizations, especially if, let's say, you're in the e-commerce space, or if you're in specific industries, there are lots of reports out there that can give you a good sense of what that addressable market is. But I always say, as a start, when you are small, make sure that you're fully convinced that this works, or the reports that you read are all in its local context. Now, the second I will talk about is a bit about competition, right? And, I've heard many different startup founders come to me and say, we have no competition because our idea is so novel that there is no one true competition. Maybe we have 3 products and I get competition in 1 or 2, but I almost never have a one true competitor. Well, my reply is always that, having no competition could also mean that your product doesn't work, right? So hard truth, but it's a reality that there will be no competition, either because either the market doesn't understand your product, it's too early, or it's too expensive to exploit this industry. So I would say take a hard look at why you have no competition if you really believe that you don't. And the second is that if you have too many competitors in your industry, it usually means that you're a little too late. Right now, if today you try to start up to be a competitor to YouTube, you can almost be certain that you're going to be crushed in no time, right? Because the market is already so saturated, the companies are already so mature, right? So this is a very extreme example where, if you enter an industry which is really highly competitive, then unless you're something that is so unique that you can offer that is radically different in that space, is almost certain that you're going to have an extremely hard time. So let's go back to just maybe some reflection. Spend the next 30 seconds to a minute thinking about who are your customers and write it down, right? Write it on the same sheet of paper. You have your mission and vision statement on top. Now let's talk a bit about your customers. List out at least three. If you can list out three categories of people that would be your customers, right? They can be, you can say, these are my colleagues who work in this industry. That would be one category. It could be my social setting. These are the people I drink wine with, or these are the people that I go biking with that will use my product. Think of 2 or 3 different sections of customers that could potentially be customers of your product. Then in that same sheet of paper, write down who is your competition today, right? If you're going to start a new fast food business, it's McDonald's, it's Burger King, it's KFC. Are these people your competition? Or are you doing something so niche in the fast food business that you would not consider these guys a competition? Right? Maybe you're doing fried sushi, I don't know, something that is out of this world and so novel that, again, no competition could mean that it's so radically off the charts that nobody wants to buy your product, or it could be so novel and so interesting that you're the only one who can do it. Right. So this is a food for thought on, we have gone through the dreaming process, the testing process. Now let's just quickly move on to the last bit. This is what I call the secret sauce. Now, I think this is, again, a very challenging question that we all have to ask ourselves. Now, what is your unfair advantage? What is it that makes you, and you specifically, the correct person to run this startup? You have a great idea, and so do many other people. So why is it that you are the right person? Are you able to express your unfair advantage to the universe, right? And I just give a very simple definition here. Your unfair advantage is a skill that you have that is your unique talent. So the emphasis here is really on the individual, on the founder, the founder's connections, network, skill set that only you possess, right? So that anybody who tries to come in will find it difficult to overcome this barrier, because for him or her to get to where you are, they would need to spend X number of years to get there. Now, in my case, I think if I ask myself honestly, what is my unfair advantage in Funded Here as a business that I run? I would explain it this way. My unfair advantage is that by nature as an individual, I am a compulsive networker. I like to meet people. I don't switch on an extrovert personality. I am extroverted by nature. My parents are. I grew up in an environment where they were introducing me to their friends since I was a little boy. And a lot of the relationships that I built are with people who could be significantly older than me. So I had to learn how to speak to older people at a much younger age. And as a result of that, and growing up in the environment, have built relationships with a lot of people that are of very high trust. It was something that I did not intend for, but as I grew up in the environment, I came to understand that this was something that I loved. I love to work with people. I love innovation. And as a result, started Funded Here, right? And the result, or my unfair advantage, is that I have maybe intergenerational relationships with people that was built over many, many years, because they are not just my peers. They are my parents' friends' children. They are my parents' friends. They are people that know me, know my family, and we all enjoy engaging in a meaningful way to make the world a better place, right? So in my situation, I find that this could give me an unfair advantage against anybody who's trying to build a platform and building relationship one at a time, because they would need a lot more time to catch up in that sense. So write this on your sheet of paper. What is your unfair advantage? Why would the business only succeed with you and not with somebody else? Right. And the question I always like to ask my founders as we speak to them is, can I just hire a professional CEO to run the business? Just pay them lots of money. Can they get it to a spot that is going to be much further and faster than if it were you, right? So this question requires a bit of soul searching to understand really why you, right? And this is important. Now let's get to the crux of the conversation. I chose this picture because I think deep sea diving gives a very good analogy to the challenges of fundraising, right? And before I go into the whole idea of fundraising, funding, as I mentioned earlier, is a lot like the oxygen to the human body, right? And in funding, there are three general ways that you can go about it. You would have heard of this before. It's called bootstrapping, right? And bootstrapping simply means that you're funding the business by yourself. If you need, say, $200,000 to get the business off the ground, you have money, or you have family and friends who are essentially giving you this money for nothing in return. I'll call that bootstrapping, right? And therefore you have absolute control of the business. You get to decide what you want to do. You are beholden to nobody but yourself, right? It's a small group. I mean, it presupposes that you have a fair amount of affluence to begin with. But if not, I would say most of us would have to go to the second and third means of doing so, right? And the second is you have to raise funds. Now, if you are a startup in the tech space, you're going to be raising funds for a very long time, right? And I think the whole VC industry came out of this, that for any tech company, you are essentially front loading all your CapEx, okay? CapEx is another one of those fancy terms. It just means capital expenditure, right? You're going to be investing a lot of money in your technology at the get-go to build a platform. And because this requires many, many man hours, you will find that your tech spend is usually going to be a significant portion of your cost structure in the earlier years. Now, how are you going to get the money? You go to a VC fund, you go to angel investors who understand the space, and you say, please give me X dollar so that you can have Y% in my company, right? And that's one way you can do it. Now, I would say that this in itself takes a bit of practice. It takes a lot of knowledge building. If you have no clue about what I'm talking about, please do not start your company until you have spent at least 3 to 6 months kind of understanding everything from how to raise funds, who to raise from, what do your investors expect when they invest in your company, how do you avoid future dilution, how there are just so many questions you need to ask before, and so many things you need to understand before you go in. So please don't dive into the deep sea, or don't go into a position like this where you jump in without your oxygen tank. Now, a small comment I'm going to make on this picture is that just like oxygen tanks, if you carry too much, it's just going to slow you down. If you carry too little, you run a real risk, right? That you're not going to be able to have enough oxygen, right? So there is also a whole science behind exactly how much money you should raise at what point in time, so that you can maximize the investments that come in and minimize the dilution as the founder of the company. Well, the third and most understated way of funding the business, which is getting more and more uncommon, contrary to, say, traditional belief, is that the company ought to really generate profits, right? You want to generate profits. You want to be able to make the business financially sustainable. Now, I think that has kind of really just taken a back seat in the recent years because of how technology has pushed those boundaries, right? And the idea is now, let's get more eyeballs, let's get growth at the extent of profit, right? And why do we call these companies unicorn? Sometimes we just really need to sit back and really think. Well, we call them a unicorn because they almost don't exist, or there are very few people who can really sort of run 10 years of a business raising capital with no profit and survive. Very few, right? The Facebooks of the world, the Amazons, the Alibabas of the world, but those are really, really very unique cases, right? Unfortunately, in this business, you can also see many companies that have gone on to the Series D round and E round. They do rapid expansion to multiple geographies, and they fail. They fail because it's just not easy. I mean, this is uncommon, right? And well, I see a couple of questions coming in here. I'm just going to try my best to answer them. So sorry to just keep pushing here on and off, but I got a question on, can bootstrapping be sustainable in the long run? The quick answer is it really depends on how fast you want to grow, right? If you think about the traditional brick and mortar business, let's say we take an F&B, you set up one shop, it makes enough money, you have now spare cash in your capacity in your wallet, you can go and set up a second shop, and then you can set up a third shop, right? So bootstrapping should lead to profit generation, right? Because you are now supporting the initial part of the business, and once the business is sustainable, then you don't need to bootstrap anymore. Now, if you're bootstrapping for a very, very long time and that's not the intended outcome, then you should really question whether there is something perhaps wrong with the business model. I have another question that came. I am not sure how do I see it. I would love to answer that as well. If I saw another question, could you kindly just ask it or just type it in again, and I can very quickly address your question. If not, I'll just carry on here and just talk about, so do consider profit generation as really a key matrix as well. A lot of businesses that use technology are not tech companies. Okay, I'm going to say that again. A lot of businesses that use technology are not tech companies, right? So just give an example. When we say a company is fintech, right? Those are companies that are technologically driven for the financial industry. Now, if you're just a finance or you're in investments and you have automation as one aspect of a technology, you have that in itself doesn't qualify you as a fintech company. Now, in those situations, perhaps going down the VC route or going to get very expensive funding may not be the right path, right? So in most situations, if the businesses are largely brick and mortar, so they are sort of very traditional manual businesses, I don't think profit generation or a path to profitability in the short run is necessarily a bad strategy. Right, that's all I have for everyone. Okay, I got this question. How do I know what I need to learn before I am ready to raise funds? Right, so I would say that at the get-go, let's go to Dr. Google, right? And let's talk a bit about one, how do I prepare financial statements, right? And I think you have what I call basic, intermediate, and high level. But at the very basic, I think it's something that is really fairly innate to a lot of us. If you just think of the example, money in the wallet, whether it's e-wallet or physical wallet, you have $50. You can't spend more than $50 unless you borrow money from someone else. If you to borrow money, then there is an expectation to pay back. People are going to ask you, how are you going to pay back? They're going to ask you, why should I lend you? How risky is it? And therefore, I need to pay a coupon or I need to pay some interest on that. So those are, I think, basic financial concepts that I would strongly suggest that founders get and really understand before they start the business. Now, I think there are different tools out there that I can share later on how do you prepare very basic financial statements, how do you prepare a budget, so that in the next sort of 12 months, you can articulate to family and friends and investors that you need to be able to hit certain targets to make sure that, for example, you don't lose more than $100,000 in the first year and you're profitable by the second year. Right, so that's just on the financial part. Then I think every founder should also spend some time understanding how to raise capital. Right, I think it's just a good skill set. It's negotiations, it's understanding what the other party wants, it's understanding how much you're willing to give up. It also actually has a very personal piece that you're giving up. So when people ask me, what is the most expensive form of capital? My answer is it is always is equity, right? Because if you really truly believe that your business is going to hit off and be the next unicorn, then theoretically you should be willing to pay very high interest, right? Because it's better to pay off the interest than if you were to give up equity, right? Because with the equity comes a lot of upside of the company as well, right? So you would actually prefer, as far as possible, to borrow than to give up equity, right? So I always say that founders, please guard your equity with your life, right? Because all your upside is in the equity. So I would say, just to your question, these are just maybe two areas that I would say, please get started, get the financial piece out, get the investment piece out. Everything else, I think you can also hire the right people to come in to help you with that. Do we have any other questions? I try to keep this quick, just so that we have more time on the Q&A. If you have any questions for me, we'll just put this is my email. Please feel free to connect with me if you would like. And I'm more than happy to just have a chat. For me, talking to young aspiring individuals is always very enlightening for me as well. As I shared at the start, I have 5 young kids. I'm very interested to understand what the world they are going to live in is like, right? And so I think that's something that I would really love to extend that invitation to all of you to really see how I can be a part of your journey as well. Do we have any questions that I can answer? You can use the spatial chat to just sort of push out any questions you may have. I have it in front of me, so I'll be able to see them and answer them straight away. A big part of how I like to usually spend time with aspiring founders is really just having a chat with them on what keeps them going. What keeps them going? How do we really unlock why and how we're doing what we're doing, right? So it may have nothing to do with the business, but I think what is grossly understated is really how am I able to sustain myself. I've got a question. Let's say, okay, I've got okay, I'm just going to write down because the questions are coming fast and furious. Okay, one is how do you cope with having 5 kids? One is how do you cold call investors? Let me see. Do I have any other? I had one more. Gosh. Let's see. Well, I'm just going to answer the first one. How do you cold call investors? I generally would not recommend that. I think there can be a very simple strategy around this. The first is that Singapore is very small. So there are a couple of angel networks that are out there. You can talk to ourselves are funded here. You can talk to Angel Investment Network. You have Angin out of Indonesia. You have Angel Central. You have Bansi. You have many that would be more than happy to talk to you and understand the business and then introduce you to investors if suitable. Right? I don't think you want to cold call because I think it shows that we may not have put enough practice into or enough research into understanding who our investors are, right? So I don't think that should be an option. Even if you went straight ahead and looked up what are the 10 to 15 biggest funds in Singapore, they are really just one call away. You can go into you can find a way in your own networks. I think LinkedIn to this extent is a fairly useful tool. In Singapore, I would like to say that we are half to 1 degree of separation. So if you may not know, the founder of a fund, for example, it is quite likely that you can find some connection with the investment analyst, right? So I would say spend some time understanding who you're trying to approach and then figure out a strategy around there. Okay, I've got another question. How do you manage your 5 kids and a startup? Barely. The short answer is barely. I think the whole philosophy behind the business part of it is to really strengthen the family unit. So that's my personal take. I have mixed feelings about whether investors like to hear that, because some investors see that if you have a big family or a young family, you're not very investable just because you don't have enough time. I think what's unique to the business that I'm involved in is that we're very long term, right? Because we are in private and we are in private company investing. So a lot of the value only comes out another 8 to 10 years later, right? So from that aspect, a lot of the decisions that I have to make at Funded Here have to be for the mid to long term, right? And I think finding the right investors also help, right? So my investors understand this is all long term, and as a result, give me the space and time to be able to really create value for my investors, right? But I think I always like to say this is a very theoretical answer. The reality is that with young kids at home, it's just a lot harder to work. You don't sleep enough. When you don't sleep enough, you make bad decisions, and I think generally the market and investors also sort of price that in. It's a difficult conversation, but I think being honest with your investors also help a lot. I have another question on when do we give up? When do we pivot? I think that's a difficult question. I think it's always useful to have some guidelines on when you think it's not working. But I would say that by and large, if you're getting kind of very low revenue or very low success with people buying into your products, that's usually a first red flag. Unless you are building the business for the longer term and you don't expect any revenue in the short run. But if not, I think usually take that as the first red flag, that maybe the product fit is still not perfect, right? Then I would say go back to that sheet of paper, look at your vision and your mission statement, and sort of, again, stress test those underlying assumptions. Is the market as big as I thought it was? Is this really creating value for people in the way I thought it would be, right? And I think that helps to maybe guide when you should pivot. Well, I don't think it's always good to wait until you've run out of money, right? So I think sometimes people give up because they have no choice, right? They just can't find any more funding, right? And I find that a very unique challenge, and this is something that you may want to take note. A lot of people prefer to give up the company than to actually do a down round. You may have heard of a down round, right? I'll just quickly explain. A down round is a future or later funding round where the valuation of the company is below a previous round. Now, for a lot of entrepreneurs, this is a hit to the ego, but I always tell founders that better take a hit to the ego than to be dead, right? And I find this to be a very unique and unusual problem in Asia, where people rather just close it or go into voluntary liquidation. My suggestion is that we really push those boundaries of that sort of what that ego really means to us as individuals. And if we have to do a down round, we do a down round. We live to fight another day. Right. So please never ever leave it to running out of funding before you close, or close prematurely just because you're gonna have to end up giving up a lot of equity. Right? There are still many structures around that can help you achieve your goals. I have another question on what are the criteria for Funded Here when we're selecting startups. It's hard to put everything on this conversation, but we have simply a funneling process where we look at the general parameters. For example, we generally like to look at companies that are well capitalized, right? So any founder who has put in anything between 6 to 9 months of their previously earned salaries or a portion of their net worth to show that they have skin in the game is usually an important indicator. It's not a be all and end all, but it's an important indicator. We also like to see early stage companies. So these are usually what I call the seed stage, pre-series A. They have some but small amount of revenue. And the capital that they're looking to raise is usually for scaling up. So we like to journey with startups that are going into the A and maybe even the B round, where they start to go global. And once they go global, I think that's where it's a very good time to hand over this process to the VC funds who have the reach or the global reach to invest them to international suppliers, clients that would help grow the business. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions, and then I'm going to hand it back to the friendly guys at Epic. Do we have any other questions? If not, thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this helpful. My email is dan@fundedhere.com. So if you want to reach out, please do. And I look forward to meeting all of you in the near future. Please stay on for the next conversation with my CTO, Yu Ming. He's going to share a bit about the perspective of a non-tech founder running a tech business. I think it'll be very interesting. So please stay to listen. Thank you once again, and all the best on your startup journey.